I knew the exact moment when my life in Riverside, California turned into a surveillance nightmare. It was when Wanda Kramer ripped my first camera off my front porch like she was picking an overripe tomato. My name is Xavier, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Estates for 3 peaceful years before Wanda became the HOA president. The community was one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions with Spanish-style homes, manicured lawns, and a strict rule-book that most people ignored until someone with too much time on their hands decided to enforce every single line. That person was Wanda. She was 52, with blonde hair that looked like it had been shellacked into submission every morning, and she wore pastel-colored blazers like armor. Her voice had this particular shrill quality that could cut through concrete, and she wielded the HOA bylaws like a weapon of mass destruction. The whole camera situation started because my house had been targeted by package thieves 3 times in 2 months. Nothing major, some Amazon deliveries, a birthday gift from my sister, but it was getting old. So I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I installed security cameras. 3 of them, to be precise. 1 over the garage, 1 on the front porch facing the driveway, and 1 covering the side yard where my gate was. They were sleek, modern, wireless cameras from a reputable brand, and they blended in perfectly with my beige stucco exterior. What I didn't advertise was the 4th camera. That one was tucked inside a decorative birdhouse I had mounted on the eave near my front door. It was smaller, battery-powered, and had a perfect view of my entire front porch and walkway. I had installed it as a backup after reading too many stories online about criminals disabling visible security systems. Call it paranoia, but it turned out to be the smartest decision I ever made. The first confrontation with Wanda happened on a Tuesday morning. I was working from home. I'm a software developer for a mid-sized tech company when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Wanda standing there in a salmon-colored blazer, clutching a clipboard to her chest like it was the Constitution itself. "Harrison," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to discuss your recent additions to the exterior of your home." I blinked at her. "My cameras." "Yes, your cameras." She said the word like it was something obscene. "They're in violation of the HOA architectural guidelines. Section 12, subsection 4 clearly states that any external modifications must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee before installation." I kept my voice level. "Wanda, they're security cameras, for safety. I've had packages stolen." "That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the rules." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "You need to submit a request form, include detailed specifications and photographs, and wait for committee approval. The process takes 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks. I couldn't help the frustration creeping into my voice. "What am I supposed to do about the theft in the meantime?" Her expression didn't change. "That's not the HOA's concern. You should have followed proper procedures. I'm giving you 48 hours to remove them, or the HOA will take action." She turned and walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking against my brick walkway like little gunshots. I called my neighbor, Marcus, that evening. He had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 7 years and had dealt with previous HOA boards. He laughed when I told him about Wanda's ultimatum. "Welcome to the new regime," he said. "She's been on a power trip since she got elected. Last month she fined the Hendersons because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Not kidding. She brought out paint swatches and everything." "Can she actually make me take down my cameras?" "Technically, yeah, if they're not approved. But most HOAs make exceptions for security equipment. You should go to the next board meeting and make your case. It's this Thursday at the community center." I thanked him and hung up, already dreading the meeting. But I figured it was worth a shot. I was a reasonable person, and surely the board would understand that preventing theft was more important than bureaucratic red tape. Thursday evening, I walked into the community center conference room to find about 15 other homeowners scattered across folding chairs. Wanda sat at the front table with 4 other board members. A quiet older man named Gerald, 2 middle-aged women who seemed to agree with everything Wanda said, and a younger guy who spent most of the meeting staring at his phone. When it came time for homeowner comments, I stood up and explained my situation. I kept it brief and factual: the thefts, the need for security, the fact that the cameras were unobtrusive and clearly for safety purposes. Wanda listened with her arms crossed, her mouth pressed into a thin line. When I finished, she didn't even pause before responding. "The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Xavier. If we make exceptions for you, we have to make exceptions for everyone. Before you know it, the neighborhood will look like a prison yard with cameras everywhere. Your request is denied. The cameras must come down by Saturday, or you'll be fined $100 per day per violation. That's $300 daily." I felt my face flush. "That's ridiculous. These are for preventing crime. The decision is final." She moved on to the next agenda item before I could say another word. I left that meeting furious. $300 a day for security cameras. I spent Friday researching California HOA law, trying to find some loophole or protection. What I found was complicated. HOAs in California have broad authority, but there are limits. Security devices are supposed to be treated differently than purely decorative changes, but the language was vague enough that Wanda could probably make her case stick, at least long enough to rack up thousands in fines. Saturday morning, I decided to compromise. I took down the 2 most visible cameras, the one over the garage and the one on the porch, but I left the side yard camera up. It was partially obscured by a tree, and you really had to look for it to notice it. I figured maybe she would be satisfied with 2 out of 3. I also made sure the hidden birdhouse camera was fully charged and recording. Something about Wanda's aggressive approach made me uneasy. I wanted documentation of any future interactions. That afternoon, I was in my home office when I heard a noise outside. It was a scraping, ripping sound, followed by what sounded like something hitting the ground. I immediately pulled up my camera feeds on my phone. The side yard camera was dead. Black screen. My heart started pounding. I switched to the birdhouse camera feed, and there she was, Wanda Kramer, standing in my side yard, holding my camera in her hand. She had a small ladder leaned against my fence, and I could see where she had literally ripped the camera mount out of the stucco. She examined it for a moment, then threw it into a canvas bag she had sitting on the ground. I watched in disbelief as she folded up the ladder and walked around to my front porch. She looked around, quickly checking if anyone was watching. I assumed, then reached up and yanked down one of the cameras I had already removed and replaced with just the empty mount. She frowned when she realized it was just a mount, then spotted the other mount and checked it too. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She pulled out her phone and took several photos of my front porch, door, and windows. Not just casual snapshots, she was being methodical, getting different angles, zooming in on things. When she finished, she walked back to her car, which was parked on the street, threw the ladder and bag in her trunk, and drove away. The whole thing had taken maybe 5 minutes. I sat there staring at my computer screen, replaying the footage. She had trespassed on my property, destroyed my property, and stolen my camera. And I had the whole thing in crystal clear 1080p video, complete with timestamp. My first instinct was to call the police immediately, but something made me pause. I had dealt with enough bureaucracy to know that I needed to think strategically. If I went to the police now, Wanda would claim she had HOA authority to remove unapproved modifications. It would turn into a he said, she said situation about property rights and HOA jurisdiction. I needed more. I needed her to dig herself deeper. So instead, I sent Wanda an email. I kept it professional and calm. Wanda, I noticed that my remaining camera in the side yard has gone missing. I had left it up because it monitors my gate lock and I've had concerns about property access. Do you know anything about this? I'd hate to file a police report if this is just a misunderstanding. Please let me know. Thanks, Harrison. Her response came 30 minutes later. Harrison, as HOA president, I conducted a compliance inspection of your property today and removed the unauthorized security device that remained after the deadline. This is within the HOA's rights as outlined in the CC and Articles section 8.3. The device will be returned to you once you have paid the accumulated fines and received written approval for any future installations. You have been assessed fines totaling $900 for 3 days of non-compliance with 3 violations. Payment is due within 30 days. Wanda Kramer, HOA President. I read the email 3 times. She had just admitted in writing to taking my camera. Even better, she was claiming HOA authority that I was 99% sure she didn't actually have. CC and Articles covenants, conditions, and restrictions are the governing documents for HOAs, but they don't give board members the right to enter private property and confiscate personal items without notice. I called a lawyer that Monday. Her name was Rebecca Torres, and she specialized in HOA disputes. I sent her all the footage from my birdhouse camera, the email exchange, and copies of our HOA's governing documents. She called me back 2 hours later, and I could hear the smile in her voice. This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen in a while. She committed criminal trespass, vandalism, and theft all on camera. The HOA's CC and Articles don't give her anything close to the authority she claims. You have her dead to rights. So what do? Well, you have options. You can file a police report and pursue criminal charges. You can sue her personally and the HOA for damages and harassment. Or you can do both. My recommendation: start with a strongly worded letter from me outlining the legal violations and demanding immediate return of your property, withdrawal of all fines, and a written apology. Give her a chance to back down. If she doubles down, we go nuclear. I liked Rebecca's style. The letter went out the next day via certified mail. It was 3 pages of legal language that boiled down to: you screwed up badly, we have video evidence, return the camera and drop the fines or face criminal and civil action. Wanda's response came not from her, but from the HOA's lawyer, a guy named Peter Davidson. His letter was more measured, but essentially said the HOA stood by its authority to enforce compliance, and that I needed to follow proper procedures. Rebecca made a phone call to Peter. I wasn't on the call, but she told me afterward that once she described the video evidence of Wanda trespassing and stealing property, there was a long silence on the other end. Peter apparently said he would review the matter with his client and get back to us. That's when things got weird. 2 days after Rebecca's call with Peter, I came home from grocery shopping to find my front door ajar. Not wide open, just slightly open like someone had closed it but it hadn't latched. My stomach dropped. I hadn't left it open. I was absolutely certain. I pulled out my phone and checked the birdhouse camera footage, scrolling back to when I had left for the store. There I was, leaving and pulling the door shut behind me. I watched myself get in my car and drive away. 30 minutes later, Wanda appeared in the frame. She walked up to my porch, looked around, and then did something that made me gasp out loud. She pulled out a key, an actual key, and unlocked my front door. She went inside. I watched the timestamp tick forward. She was in my house for 12 minutes. When she came out, she was carrying a small cardboard box. She locked the door behind her, but apparently not well because it had drifted open. I sat in my car in the driveway, watching this footage on my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. She had a key to my house. How did she have a key to my house? Then I remembered when I bought the house, the HOA had required me to submit a key to the management company for emergencies. I had thought it was weird, but the escrow officer said it was standard in some communities. The key was supposed to be stored in a lockbox at the management office, only accessible for legitimate emergencies like fire or flood when the homeowner couldn't be reached. Wanda had used that emergency key to break into my house. I called Rebecca immediately. "Don't go inside," she said. "Call the police right now. This is breaking and entering. The emergency key provision doesn't give her the right to enter your home for HOA enforcement. This is a felony." I dialed 911, and 2 Riverside police officers arrived within 15 minutes. I showed them the footage on my phone, Wanda using the key, entering my house, leaving with a box. They asked me to check if anything was missing, so I went inside with one of the officers. It didn't take long to figure out what she had taken. My home office looked normal except for one thing: the shelf where I kept my backup hard drives was empty. I had 3 external drives there where I backed up my personal files, photos, and work projects. All 3 were gone. The officer, a woman named Martinez, took notes while her partner called for a detective. "You know why she would take your hard drives specifically?" Martinez asked. I thought about it. Maybe she thought I had camera footage stored on them, but I don't. The cameras use cloud storage. Those drives are just personal backups. She probably didn't know that, Martinez said. She's trying to eliminate evidence. A detective arrived an hour later. His name was Detective Raymond Walsh, a tired-looking guy in his 40s with graying hair. I showed him everything: the original footage of Wanda taking my cameras, the email exchange, the footage of her breaking in and taking the hard drives. He watched it all on my laptop, making notes. "Mr. Xavier, I'm going to be straight with you. This is a weird case. We've got clear evidence of trespassing, theft, and burglary. But because it involves an HOA dispute, the DA's office might get squirrely about prosecution. HOAs operate in this weird legal gray area that makes prosecutors nervous." "But she broke into my house," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I know. And that's a crime, period. I'm just managing expectations. What I'm going to do is collect all this evidence, get your statement, and put together a case. We'll go have a conversation with Miss Kramer and see what she has to say. Sometimes these things resolve themselves once people realize they're facing serious charges." He was good to his word. I gave a detailed statement, signed some forms, and he took copies of all the video files. He said he would be in touch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Wanda in my house, going through my things. It felt violating in a way that surprised me. I had always thought of burglary as something criminals did for money or drugs. This was different. This was someone who lived 4 streets over, someone who served on volunteer committees and probably thought of herself as a pillar of the community. And she had broken into my home to try to destroy evidence of her own wrongdoing. The next morning, Rebecca called. "The HOA's lawyer dropped them as a client," she said. "I just got a very terse email from Peter Davidson saying he no longer represents Meadowbrook Estates HOA or Wanda Kramer personally, effective immediately." "That's good, right? That's very good." It means he figured out how bad this is, and he doesn't want his name anywhere near it when it blows up. Lawyers don't dump clients lightly. It's bad for business. He must have reviewed the evidence and realized Wanda is going to get crucified. So, what happens now? We wait for the police to do their thing. In the meantime, I'm going to file a civil suit against Wanda personally and the HOA as an organization. We're going for damages, emotional distress, attorney's fees, and an injunction preventing any further harassment. I'm also going to file complaints with the California Department of Real Estate. They oversee HOA management, and see if we can get Wanda removed from the board. Over the next week, I learned a lot about how the legal system works. Detective Walsh went to interview Wanda. According to what he told me later, she initially denied everything, then claimed she had authority as HOA president, then finally admitted taking the cameras and entering my house, but said she was just trying to enforce community standards. When he asked about the hard drives, she apparently broke down crying and said she thought I was recording private HOA meetings illegally, which didn't make sense since I hadn't been to a meeting since the one where she threatened me, and she was protecting the privacy of board members. None of it held up. Walsh submitted his case to the district attorney's office, and after 2 weeks, they filed charges. Wanda Kramer was charged with 1 count of first-degree burglary, 3 counts of grand theft, 1 count of vandalism, and 2 counts of trespassing. The burglary charge was the big one in California. Entering an occupied residence with intent to commit theft is taken very seriously, even if no one was home at the time. She was arrested on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there, but Marcus texted me about it. Apparently, 2 officers showed up at her house, arrested her in her driveway, and took her away in handcuffs. The neighborhood gossip chain went into overdrive. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Rebecca's civil suit was moving forward. We served papers on Wanda and the HOA board. The board, now down to 4 members and without a lawyer, went into panic mode. I got a call from Gerald, the quiet older man on the board. He sounded exhausted. "Harrison, I want to apologize on behalf of the board. We had no idea Wanda was doing any of this. When she told us she had removed your cameras, she said she had done it during a normal compliance inspection and that you had been notified. We didn't know she had broken into your home or taken your property." "I appreciate that, Gerald." The rest of the board has voted to remove Wanda from her position, effective immediately. We're also withdrawing all fines against you and formally approving your security camera installation. We'd like to settle this matter without a prolonged legal battle if you're willing. I told him I would discuss it with my lawyer. Rebecca and I had a long conversation about it. She pointed out that while the criminal case against Wanda would proceed regardless, the civil suit could drag on for years and cost a lot in legal fees, even if we won. "The board seems genuinely sorry and they're offering to make things right," she said. "We can push for a settlement that covers your actual damages, your attorney's fees, a written apology, and changes to the HOA's policies to prevent this from happening again. Sometimes that's a better outcome than a court battle." We negotiated back and forth with the HOA's new lawyer. They had hired someone else, a woman who seemed much more reasonable than Peter Davidson had been. The final settlement included $5,000 for my damaged cameras and stolen hard drives, full reimbursement of all my legal fees, a formal written apology from the board, changes to the HOA's governing documents to explicitly allow security cameras without prior approval, removal of the emergency key policy. Homeowners could choose whether to provide keys, and they would be stored by a bonded third-party company, not accessible to board members. a 3-year moratorium on any enforcement actions against my property. I signed the settlement agreement on a Tuesday afternoon. It felt good to have it resolved, even though the criminal case was still pending. Wanda's preliminary hearing happened in late August. I had to testify, which was nerve-wracking. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and Wanda sat at the defense table with a public defender apparently. Her personal lawyer had also dropped her, once he realized how bad the evidence was. I walked through everything for the judge. The original camera installation, Wanda's threats, her taking the cameras, the break-in, the stolen hard drives. The prosecutor played the video footage from my birdhouse camera on a screen. Watching Wanda unlock my door and walk into my house, displayed on a courtroom monitor with a judge and lawyers watching, made the whole thing feel surreal. Wanda's public defender tried to argue that she had genuinely believed she had authority to enter the property for HOA enforcement, but the prosecutor shot that down quickly. Your Honor, the defendant is an HOA president, not a law enforcement officer. Even if there had been a legitimate HOA violation, which there wasn't, that doesn't give her the right to enter someone's home and take their property. This is textbook burglary. The judge agreed. Wanda was bound over for trial. Her lawyer approached the prosecutor about a plea deal. I wasn't directly involved in those negotiations, but Detective Walsh kept me updated. The DA's office offered a deal. Plead guilty to 1 count of burglary and 1 count of grand theft, drop the other charges, recommend a sentence of 90 days in county jail, 3 years probation, restitution, and community service. Wanda initially rejected it. She apparently still believed she had done nothing wrong, that she was just enforcing HOA rules. Her lawyer must have explained reality to her, because 2 weeks later she accepted the deal. The sentencing hearing was in October. I gave a victim impact statement, which Rebecca had helped me prepare. I kept it factual and focused on how the experience had made me feel unsafe in my own home, how I had spent money on additional security measures, how the stress had affected my work and personal life. Wanda also spoke. She apologized, but it felt hollow. She talked about how she had been trying to maintain property values and keep the community nice, and she had just gotten too zealous. She never really seemed to understand that what she had done was a serious violation of my rights. The judge wasn't buying it either. Miss Kramer, you held a position of trust in your community. You were elected to serve your neighbors, not to harass them. You entered Mr. Xavier's home illegally and stole his property in an attempt to cover up your own misconduct. That's not zeal, that's criminal behavior. I'm sentencing you to 90 days in county jail, 3 years probation, and I'm ordering you to pay full restitution to Mr. Xavier. You're also prohibited from serving on any HOA board during your probation period. I hope you use this time to reflect on the serious breach of trust you committed. Wanda served her 90 days. I didn't follow her case closely after that. I was ready to move on with my life. The neighborhood changed after the whole incident. The HOA board became much more low-key and reasonable. Gerald took over as president and ran things with a light touch. The Architectural Review Committee started approving requests much more quickly and reasonably. Several homeowners who had been cited for minor violations had their fines rescinded. I also noticed a lot more security cameras popping up around the neighborhood. Apparently, my situation had made people realize they wanted their own documentation of what happened on their property. I kept my cameras up, including the hidden birdhouse camera. Every now and then I would check the footage, and it was always mundane stuff: delivery drivers, neighbors walking dogs, the occasional cat. But I didn't mind. It was a small price to pay for peace of mind. Marcus and I became better friends after everything. He had testified at the preliminary hearing about the neighborhood tension and Wanda's pattern of aggressive enforcement. We started having barbecues in my backyard, and he introduced me to some of the other neighbors who I hadn't really known before. One evening, about 6 months after Wanda's sentencing, Marcus and I were sitting on my back patio with beers, grilling burgers. "You ever think about moving?" he asked. After everything that happened, I had thought about it. Right after the break-in, I had looked at real estate listings, imagined starting over somewhere without HOA drama. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that would be letting Wanda win in a way. "Nah," I said. "I like this house. I like most of the neighbors. One person's bad behavior doesn't change that. Besides, the HOA is actually functional now." Marcus laughed. "That's true. Gerald approved my patio extension in like 3 days. Under Wanda, it would have been a 6-month ordeal with 17 forms and a public hearing." We sat there as the sun set, the smell of burgers on the grill mixing with the jasmine that grew along my back fence. My security camera blinked its little red light from the corner of the eave, recording everything, just in case. Life in Meadowbrook Estates returned to normal, or as normal as suburban life gets. I went back to focusing on my work, my hobbies, my friends. The whole experience had taught me a few things. Document everything, know your rights, and never underestimate the importance of a hidden camera. The fourth camera, the one in the birdhouse that Wanda never knew about, was still there. I had added a few more hidden cameras around the property too, one in a fake rock by the side gate, one in a decorative solar light near the driveway. Not because I was paranoid, but because I had learned that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them and prepare accordingly. I also got more involved in the HOA after everything settled down. I started attending meetings regularly, not to cause trouble, but to make sure the board was operating transparently and fairly. Several other homeowners did the same. We formed a kind of informal watchdog group, making sure the mistakes of the Wanda era didn't repeat themselves. Gerald actually appreciated it. At one meeting, he said it was nice to have engaged homeowners who cared about the community without being tyrants about it. The board started publishing detailed minutes from their meetings, posting them on a community website so everyone could see what was being discussed and decided. Financial reports became transparent. Rule enforcement became consistent and reasonable. It was wild how much one person's removal could improve an entire community's quality of life. I ran into Wanda once, about a year after her sentencing. I was at a Target in Riverside, shopping for dish soap and paper towels, when I turned down an aisle and there she was. She looked different, older, tired. The shellacked hair was gone, replaced by a more natural style. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of her signature pastel blazers. Our eyes met for a second. I saw recognition and something else, shame, maybe, or embarrassment. She turned her cart around and went down a different aisle without saying anything. I didn't follow her or try to engage. What would be the point? She had faced consequences for her actions. I had gotten justice, compensation, and peace of mind. There was nothing left to say. I finished my shopping and went home, where my cameras dutifully recorded my arrival, my unloading of groceries, my completely unremarkable evening of dinner and television. Sometimes boring is beautiful. The civil settlement money helped me make some improvements to the house. I redid my back patio, installed new energy-efficient windows, and upgraded my home office setup. Every time I sat at my new desk or looked out my new windows, I thought about how strange it was that Wanda's vindictive campaign had ultimately resulted in my house being nicer than before. Rebecca and I stayed in touch. She sent me a fruit basket when the settlement check cleared, along with a note that said, "Thanks for the easiest case of my career." I referred several friends to her when they had legal issues. She was good at her job, and I appreciated how she had handled everything with competence and humor. Detective Walsh also checked in a few months after the case closed. He said he had been following up on some other HOA complaints in the area and wanted to know if I had heard anything about aggressive enforcement in neighboring communities. Apparently, my case had opened eyes at the department about how HOA disputes could escalate into criminal behavior. They were taking these complaints more seriously now. I told him things were quiet in Meadowbrook Estates, but I would let him know if I heard anything. He gave me his card and said to call anytime. The weirdest part of the whole experience was the minor internet fame that followed. Someone I never found out who had posted about my situation on a Reddit forum dedicated to HOA horror stories. The post went viral, getting thousands of upvotes and comments. People shared their own nightmarish experiences with power-hungry board members and out-of-control community associations. A few journalists even reached out to me, wanting to do stories about HOA overreach and homeowner rights. I declined most of them. I didn't want to become the poster child for HOA reform or anything like that. I just wanted to live my life in peace. But I did agree to one interview with a local news station in Riverside. The reporter was a young woman named Jessica who did consumer protection stories. She interviewed me in my living room, with my front porch and its cameras visible through the window behind me. The story aired on a Friday evening. It was a 6-minute segment that covered the basics: my cameras, Wanda's escalating behavior, the break-in, the arrest, the conviction. They blurred Wanda's face in the security footage, but the impact was still clear. The segment ended with Jessica standing in front of the Meadowbrook Estates sign, talking about the importance of homeowners knowing their rights and HOA boards operating within legal boundaries. The response was overwhelming. I got emails and calls from people all over California sharing their own HOA nightmares. Some were worse than mine: foreclosures over unpaid fines, harassment campaigns that lasted years, board members who embezzled association funds. It made me realize I had actually gotten off relatively easy, all things considered. It also made me realize how broken the HOA system can be. These organizations are supposed to maintain property values and provide community amenities, but too often they become little fiefdoms for people who crave power and control. And homeowners have limited recourse because the legal system treats HOA disputes as civil matters, even when they cross over into criminal behavior. I started thinking about ways to change that. I reached out to my state assembly member's office and shared my story. A staffer called me back and said they were actually working on legislation to reform HOA governance and increase oversight. They asked if I would be willing to testify if the bill went to committee. I said yes. 6 months later, I found myself in Sacramento, sitting in a committee hearing room, telling my story to a panel of state legislators. It was intimidating. These were people who made laws that affected millions of Californians, but they listened intently. Several of them asked questions about the specifics of what Wanda had done and how the legal system had responded. The bill ultimately passed. It included provisions requiring HOAs to carry liability insurance, mandating training for board members on legal responsibilities, creating easier paths for homeowners to challenge improper fines, and increasing penalties for board members who abuse their authority. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. The governor signed it in September, 2 years after Wanda had first torn down my cameras. I got an invitation to the signing ceremony, and I stood in the background while the governor made a speech about protecting homeowners and ensuring community associations serve their intended purpose. It felt surreal. A dispute over security cameras had led to me standing in the California state capitol watching legislation become law. Life has a funny way of taking the worst experiences and turning them into something meaningful if you let it. Back in Meadowbrook Estates, things continued to improve. The HOA used some of its reserve funds to upgrade the community pool and playground. They organized neighborhood events, summer barbecues, holiday decorating contests, emergency preparedness workshops. People started knowing their neighbors again, instead of just filing complaints about them. Gerald served 2 terms as president and then stepped down, saying he wanted someone younger and more energetic to take over. A woman named Patricia, who lived on the next street over, ran for the position and won. She was a retired teacher, patient and thoughtful, and she brought that same energy to running the HOA. Under her leadership, the board started focusing on building community instead of just enforcing rules. I even joined a committee, the Safety and Security Committee, naturally. We worked on things like improving street lighting, organizing neighborhood watch programs, and making sure the community had proper evacuation plans for wildfires, which are always a concern in Southern California. It was actually kind of fulfilling to channel my experience into something productive. My cameras continued doing their job. They captured a hit-and-run accident on my street one night, and the footage helped police identify the driver. They recorded a teenager spray painting graffiti on the community mailboxes, leading to the kid getting caught and having to clean it up and apologize to everyone. They even caught a coyote walking down the middle of the street at 2 in the morning, which was cool to see even if it wasn't legally relevant to anything. The birdhouse camera, my secret weapon that had captured everything, remained in place. Every few months, I would change the battery and check the footage. It was mostly boring stuff, but I didn't care. That camera had saved me from a nightmare scenario where it would have been my word against Wanda's, where she could have claimed anything and I would have had no proof. Technology had been my ally when human systems failed me. I thought about that sometimes, late at night when I was reviewing footage or adjusting camera settings. We live in a surveillance society now, for better or worse. Everyone has cameras, doorbell cameras, security cameras, dash cams, body cams. We're all documenting everything all the time. It raises privacy concerns, sure, but it also creates accountability. People behave differently when they know they might be recorded. Would Wanda have broken into my house if she had known about the 4th camera? Probably not. She had thought she was being clever, taking the visible cameras and using my own security system against me. She hadn't counted on me being one step ahead. The whole experience changed how I thought about trust and documentation. I used to be the kind of person who took people at their word, who assumed good intentions, who didn't feel the need to protect myself from my own neighbors. Wanda had shattered that naive worldview. But I didn't want to become cynical or paranoid. I still believed most people were good, most neighbors were reasonable, most disputes could be resolved with communication and compromise. I just also believed in having a backup plan. Marcus and I were talking about this one evening, a few years after everything had settled down. We were at his house this time, sitting on his back deck, watching his kids play in the yard. "You think you'll ever take the cameras down?" he asked. I considered it. The threat was long gone. Wanda was out of my life. The HOA was functioning properly. The neighborhood was peaceful. "Nah," I said. "They're useful beyond just the Wanda situation. They help with package deliveries, they make me feel secure when I travel, they give me peace of mind. Plus, after everything I went through to keep them up, it would feel weird to take them down now. Marcus laughed. Fair enough. I got some cameras too after your situation. Haven't caught anyone breaking in yet, but I did get some great footage of a raccoon fighting with my trash can. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the kids play, listening to the evening sounds of the neighborhood. Dogs barking in the distance, someone mowing their lawn, the ice cream truck making its rounds. This was what community was supposed to be. People living their lives, respecting boundaries, helping when needed, leaving each other alone when desired. Not perfect, but functional. Not dramatic, but peaceful. The cameras on my house blinked their little indicator lights, recording everything, protecting nothing in particular, just being there in case they were ever needed again. And the fourth camera, hidden in its decorative birdhouse, continued its silent watch over my front porch. Nobody knew it was there except me. It was my insurance policy, my secret advantage, my lesson learned from a woman who thought she could abuse her power without consequences. Wanda Kramer had taught me that documentation was everything, that you couldn't trust people in positions of authority to do the right thing, that sometimes the only way to protect yourself was to have evidence that couldn't be disputed. They were harsh lessons, but valuable ones. I sometimes wondered what Wanda was doing now, whether she had learned anything from her experience, whether she regretted her actions or just regretted getting caught. I would never know, and that was fine. Her story had intersected with mine for a brief, intense period, and then we had gone our separate ways. My life was better now than it had been before the whole incident. I had a better understanding of my rights, better relationships with my neighbors, a better home with all the improvements I had made. I had even contributed to changing state law in a way that might help other homeowners avoid what I went through. In a weird way, I was almost grateful to Wanda. Not for what she did, but for what I learned and accomplished because of it. Almost. The sun was setting over Meadowbrook Estates, painting the Spanish-style homes in shades of orange and pink. My cameras captured the beautiful light, storing the footage in the cloud, creating a record of another peaceful evening in Southern California. Somewhere in that footage, if you looked closely at the right angle, you could see the decorative birdhouse mounted near my front door. It looked like a charming piece of suburban decoration, the kind of thing a homeowner puts up because they like birds or want to add a touch of personality to their exterior. But hidden inside that birdhouse was a camera lens, watching everything, recording everything, protecting me from threats both real and imagined. The fourth camera. The one nobody knew about except me, and that's exactly how I wanted to keep it.